Okay, welcome back to part 2 of 2.31, I believe this is. So let us then pick up where we left off. Judgmental forecasting relies on the experience and insights of people in the organization to predict future needs. And I know many of you guys are in your 4th year. In fact, this is your final semester at Ohio State. And if empiricism and coming to decisions empirically has not been beaten into your head by now, maybe I can help beat it into your head a little bit more as we kind of close out for many of you your final semester. Judgmental forecasting is fine to a certain extent, but it really needs to be based on data and augmented by data and verified compared to existing data. We all love our opinions, but we can do better than opinion. We can do opinion based on evidence. So let's make our judgments on the basis of evidence rather than, well, I remember when. That's kind of shady. What we're talking about here is using experience, using insight, hopefully promoted by the observation of data. Now, it can work top-down or bottom-up. The top-down organizational leaders rely on their experience and knowledge of the industry to make predictions about future staffing levels. They're going to communicate this down to the people who do the hiring, and it will guide the hiring process. Bottom-up is we consult a lot of lower-level managers. As an upper manager, I may say, hey, this is my overall plan. What is it going to take in your department to help achieve this plan? And now we're working with bottom-up opinions rather than top-down opinions. No, we're still dealing with opinions to the extent that they're unsupported by data. So often good record keeping can help supply data to the people doing the judgment forecasting. Because historic trends, relationships can change, it's usually best to supplement this with a more mechanical ratio, the scatter plot, trend forecasting, as tools to inform the judgmental forecasting. More mechanical methods can be used as a starting point, and then managerial input can be used to modify. You know, okay, I see what the data says, but you got to consider that this might be a little different, so we might want to bump that up a little bit, or we might want to stay a little short of that ultimate goal. Another way to look at this is return on investment analysis. Estimate the return of investment on adding a new position based on the costs and outcomes from that new hire. So, for example, Ohio State hired me, right? Well, I kind of fell in the job. Maybe it's a bad example, but I was there and I teach classes. What was the return on investment? What was the investment that Ohio State put into me as a teacher? It was kind of minimal when you get right down to it. It was not, you know, most of us who do this are relatively self-taught, especially 15, 20 years ago. So the training investment was relatively small. But the return on investment can be pretty huge. When you consider this year that I'll pull in for the psychology department maybe $1 million, right? And the investment in my training set has been relatively small. That's a pretty high return on investment for this particular position. So assign dollar values to the benefits you expect from a new hire, right? And the period of time appropriate for that position in your organization. How much revenue during the period will likely be generated as a result of this position? So, should we add another instructor? Well, if there's interest in courses within the department to support it, we can see that pulling in someone through a maybe $15,000, $20,000 hiring process, if you're hiring someone new into the position, but they stand to generate X amount of money, the return on investment is pretty high, right? Now, a way to also look at return on investment, and something that with one of your assignments, and should we hire or should we train, is to what extent, what is the cost of hiring versus what is the cost of training, and then calculating the return of investment in that regard. Will the trainee and the new hire be able to do, the trainee or the new hire be able to do the same thing with the same skill over the same period of time? Then it's a pretty straightforward calculation. So compare the cost with adding the new hire, compute the cost of hiring, including advertising the position, interviewing, screening, travel, relocation, training expenses, Many of you are surprised who looked at ONET and looked at the qualifications for, let's say, hiring manager, human resources position. You said, oh my God, I didn't realize there was so much software skills. Well, it's this kind of software that you often have to operate, that is, to be able to compute these kind of differences. Add this to the compensation for the new position during the time period to get your initial investment. Compare this amount with the value your company will gain to determine if the return on investment is worth it to add the new position, where it may or may not be. Now, to forecast the labor market, combining current staffing levels with anticipated staffing gains, right, losses result in an estimate of the supply of labor for the target position at some certain point in the future. Anticipated gains, losses, they can be based on historic data, right? And that's good record keeping once again, combined with managerial estimates, the judgmental forecasting as we just discussed. The external labor market consists of people who do not currently work for the firm, right? Those would be external hires. The internal labor market consists of the firm's current employees. That is, to what extent do we have people who have potential to fill these positions? Of course, this then is a trickle-down effect. If we're taking people and moving them into positions, then we're probably going to have to move people into their positions as well. But is it easier and is it cheaper to hire people into lower positions, having promoted people at mid-range positions to higher positions? We can kind of work out that calculus. Or is it better to keep these people in their positions and then hire the additional needs? Again, it's kind of a cost-benefit analysis. And often, in a human resources capacity, these decisions might necessarily be beyond us. Okay. Annika, what are you doing, sweetie? Huh? Come here, Annika. Come on, sweetie. Annika looked like she wanted to be held. So, forecasting the internal labor market, what do we know? Estimate the competency level and the number of employees likely to be working for the company at the end of the forecasting period. To forecast internal talent resources for a position, subtract the anticipated losses through retirement, through attrition, through normal calculated turnover in the target position at the beginning of the forecasting period. So it could be promotions, demotions, transfers, resignations, retirements, dismissals. When workers are harder to find, more employees than usual may leave the organization to pursue other opportunities. So if it's a hot job market that's undersupplied, you have to calculate that you're going to have a certain level of attrition. People may be going elsewhere. Or are you willing to compensate those people to stay, which is another part of the calculus. Okay? Looser labor markets, tight labor markets have an impact on this. Anticipated gains from transfers, promotions, demotions are then added to the internal labor supply. So if we're looking at should I train or should I hire, one of the calculuses is going to be what is the internal labor market, what's the nature of it. Okay? Transition analysis. This is a technique used to analyze labor markets and forecast your internal labor supply. Simple but often effective technique for analyzing your internal labor market. It can be useful in answering recruits' questions about promotion paths and the likelihood of promotions. And wouldn't it be fair for someone who is looking for a job in your organization, if they're kind of long-term thinking, they're going to say, well, what is the potential for promotion? Do you have a plan for that? Do you have numbers? Hi, Proton. How you doing, buddy? Look at Proton. Proton's probably pretty happy. Proton. You know, Electron's coming home a little later. We're going to go pick up Electron. We're going to go pick up your brother from the vet in a little bit. So we can also forecast the number of people who currently work for the organization likely to be employed in various positions at some point in the future. Okay? The analysis is best kept performed for a limited number of jobs at a time so that it's easy to interpret. If we're going to look at everyone who's working in a large organization, this is probably going to become cumbersome, overwhelming, and maybe not tell us a whole lot. So let's take a look. The target position. So you see that the target position, our focus, right? What are two, let's say in this example, there are two feeder positions. What that means is this position often promotes into the target position, and this lower level position often promotes into the target position. So what do we know about the feeder positions? Who's in the feeder positions? What's the likelihood of their promotability? Or you can have kind of an intervening box here. What is our potential to train, grow, or promote people into these positions, right? In the target position, right? But the promotions then also then take away from the target position. So if these are target positions, someone moving up, right, leaves vacancies here, right? Now, what else do we have then? Well, there may be exits, that is people who just leave the organization. We may also have people who do lateral moves and transfers. In some organizations, I'll use my wife's organization, Nationwide Insurance, for an example, and the paralegals, there's not a lot of promotion. There's like 3 or 4 steps to paralegals. What happens if someone's been a paralegal at Nationwide for 15 years, let's say, and they've pretty much maxed out? That is their paralegal supervisor or whatever it is, the top position. Then what might happen? Well, the promotion's unlikely. They can't promote to lawyer because they're not lawyers, right? They're not going to promote to some other aspect of the company because they're paralegals. So they might make lateral moves or transfers, and this is something you might want to track as well. To what extent do people change divisions, departments, etc.? And then, God forbid, and to what extent might we expect to see demotions, right? So this really tells us about the target position. But if you understand this process, let's go back to the recruit, and they're saying, what are the chances for promotion? And you say, well, you know, we're going to hire you into this job. Well, we're not going to call it feeder position. We're going to call it by name. But then we typically promote from this position up to this other position, right? And then that position may promote to another position. So we can explain that, the potential path to promotion for new recruits. Now, so internal labor market forecasting methods, judgment. Okay, so we go back to judgment. Not much to say there. Let's move on. Talent inventories is a nice technique to see what people possess within the organization. So in this, what you do is it's essentially a survey, a questionnaire of some sort. Maybe you want to do it annually, do it as part of someone's annual review. Hey, what additional skills do you have that you might want to share with us, right? Is someone good at computer programming, but it's not central to their current job, but wouldn't it be nice to know that? Is someone, let's say, have multiple languages? And we may think in the future of expanding into a new foreign market. And wow, check this out. In our talent inventory, we see that several of our people already speak a language in the market in which we're attempting to move. So talent inventories allow us to capitalize on additional qualities and capacities, or KSAOs, that our people are bringing to the organization that we didn't necessarily hire them for, but we might find useful in a new context. Replacement chart visually shows each of the possible successors for a job and summarizes their present performance, promotion readiness, and developmental needs. So in this case, this is an individualized chart, and it says, hey, this is you. You are here, right? You love that line. You are here, right? But what's possible? Well, you are here, but you could be there, you could be there. But what does it take to get here or there? And that needs to be spelled out. And also some way to measure or evaluate someone's present performance and perhaps their promotion readiness, or what developmental needs do they have to move into a next position. We'd like to groom this person for this position, but they're going to need to know how to do this, and we might start arranging the training for them. Employee surveys identify the potential for increased turnover in the future, especially satisfaction, or if you will, dissatisfaction surveys. And labor supply chain management is the supply chain model to have the right product, the right volume, the right place at the right time, at the right quality. So, a replacement chart then. VP of the Vice President of Human Resources, what are we looking at? Well, if we're, saying, oh, what happens, if we ever have to, and this is contingency planning, what happens if we have to replace our Vice President of Human Resources? We should have a plan for that. Well, the people to look at right now, look, we got Sam, we got Pat, and we got Sally, right? And this is their location, and then we start looking at their strengths and or their job performance and their promotion readiness. And if we see, wow, good with finance and strategy rather than labor and relations, right? Good job performance, promotion readiness, will need global experience. This person already has so we might begin to develop this person even beforehand in anticipation of potentially promoting them at some point in the future. This could be done for virtually any position, right? Forecasting the external labor market, whole different ballgame, right? Organization monitor the external labor market in two ways. The first is through their own observations and experiences. Are the quality and quantity of applicants responding to job announcements getting better or worse? So we can look. Who's coming to us? What does that external labor market look like as they come to us? Now, there's one problem with this is to what extent is our recruiting bringing us the best, or is our recruiting process failing us? And if the recruiting process is not really a good fit to the organization's needs, then this might be very deceiving what we're talking about here. So, oh my God, these people that are coming in for this job are just shitty, man. This is horrible. We can't hire anyone. Well, is it the labor market or is it the recruiting process? Are we just not finding the right people, and they exist plentifully out there? So that's something to consider there. Okay. And the second way is monitoring labor market statistics generated by others, like the BLS, others, right? So resolving the gaps, supply-demand gaps, action plans, proactively address an anticipated surplus or shortage of employees. We decided we're going to need 10% more engineers. How are we going to do that? What is our plan to bump that up? Whether a shortage or surplus applicants is the result of temporary factors, whether it reflects trends that are likely to continue, is an important factor to understand, because different strategies are appropriate for the different situations. So if we have a temporary talent shortage, because higher salaries cost the organization more money throughout the organization's tenure, hiring inducements that last only as long as the talent shortage are often the better bet. That is, let's pay hiring bonuses, but not necessarily hiring wages, because we're dealing with a temporary shortage. Now, if it's going to be a long-term shortage and retention becomes, and reducing turnover becomes a huge part of the calculus, then we might then think in terms of increasing pay. Companies often turn to more expensive recruiting methods, such as search firms, or lower the hiring standards so that more recruits are considered qualified, and that's something that you'd have to figure out. More expensive recruiting methods quickly drain a recruiting budget, and it could be without even producing successful hires or successful recruits. Lowering hire standards decreases the quality of the company's workforce, which may not be acceptable. Options include hiring incentives such as sign-on bonuses, or retention bonuses or stock options, cash to be paid to an employee after they've worked over a period of time. So there's different mechanisms to handle temporary talent shortages, even beyond this. Now, persistent talent shortage, right, is a worker shortage that will last a number of years. The organization's got to reduce its supply demand for the talents in that category then. Increasing the use of automation and technology might be one way to do this, the use of software, right? Redesigning jobs so that fewer people with the desired talent are needed. I'll confess to you guys now, and it's probably just paranoia, but suppose we come out of this pandemic, and we come out of all this online teaching, etc., and what if they say, wow, you know, man, we could do this online. We need less classroom space. We need less facilities maintenance, and we could see that by shifting to an online environment, we could eliminate a huge number of jobs. The jobs that are necessary, like IT stuff, equipment operations, etc. Or what if the expectation comes that I have to provide my own equipment to be a teacher? Note that it changes the nature of the game that we're playing in then, and over the long term, that's something that could happen. Is Ohio State, based on the experience over the next month or two, going to come back and say, hey, you know, we should probably increase the number of online offerings and decrease the number of classroom offerings because everyone did okay? And that's not that we should use that as a reason to F this up now, because we do want to try our best just because we like to feel good about what we do. But that's an aside. Remember, it's business people that run the university, not psychologists and kumbaya folks, right? So this is not a fast or practical solution to increase the supply of the qualifications it needs. So if we have temporary employee surplus, they're cyclical, happen frequently. Contingent workers are the first to be let go. I've worked in a lot of positions where it was a simple formula, last in, first out, right, for layoff. Temporary layoffs may need to last more than 6 months to be cost effective due to severance costs, greater unemployment insurance premiums and all this, but that's become less and less the case as this course has evolved over the last decade. Losing the investments the organization has already made in hiring and training of laid-off workers can also be costly. And that's true depending on what level we're talking about. Alternatives to layoffs include across-the-board salary cuts, reduction in work hours, reallocating workers to expand other areas of the business. For example, Columbus State, if you're an adjunct faculty, that is a temporary teacher, you can teach no more than 2 classes a semester. That way they don't have to contribute to your health insurance. So, and all they then need to do is increase the number of people that they hire. The thing is, there's a surplus of teachers, so Columbus State is able to pull that off, right? That is, we're just going to compensate people less, we're going to give them shorter hours so that we don't have the same level of expense per employee, and we'll just hire more because the demand, the supply is such that it's well over the demand. So permanent employee surplus, and that might be the case that I've just described. Early retirement programs can get people the hell out, but then, you know, it's often the most skilled and the most productive and the most experienced that are taking early retirement. Layoffs can damage workforce morale and hurt the firm's reputation as an employer, an inconsistent employer. And not filling open positions can leave key positions in the organization vacant or understaffed. And remember, we opened up with the Miller organization, Miller Metals video, and that was a big problem there. So actions to address persistent employee surplus may involve reassignments, hiring freezes, steering employees away from careers or positions, and more forward-thinking, retraining employees to fill other jobs the firm can bring the labor supply and demand into balance, or anticipate its future needs and start training to meet those needs. I'm going to have to stop. We're going to be out of time, and then we'll just finish this up real quickly with a part 3.